If you follow the Linux and open source world, you've probably heard about the wave of AI-generated applications that flooded software stores over the past year. Flathub, the leading Flatpak application repository for Linux, decided to draw the line, and a few months later, the evidence seems to confirm that it was the right decision. In this video, we'll discuss Flathub's ban on AI-generated applications, the reasons behind it, and an independent study that reveals what actually happened to the apps that were rejected. At the end of May 2026, Flathub announced a policy change. Applications containing AI-generated or AI-assisted code, documentation, or other content would no longer be accepted as new submissions. This isn't a blanket ban. Mature, well-maintained projects can still use AI-generated code, and applications already available on the platform remain unaffected. In practice, the policy mainly targets new, automated submissions. What is completely prohibited is automating the submission process using AI tools or agents. That includes the application's manifest, metadata, patches, build scripts, and even the text of the GitHub pull request. In other words, if you want to publish an application on Flathub, you need to submit it yourself, not rely on a bot to fill out forms and respond to reviewer comments. Bart Piotrowski, one of the people involved in leading the project, explained on Mastodon that the decision wasn't driven by ideology or opposition to AI. Instead, it was a practical response to the overwhelming volume of submissions. Flathub's review team consists of volunteers, and they had become overloaded with submissions from users who acted as if they were doing the platform a favour, refusing to engage in constructive discussions while letting chatbots respond to reviewers' feedback. Piotrowski also acknowledged that he has mixed feelings about the ban, saying that, in his view, the use of AI in software development is likely inevitable in the long run. To understand why Flathub reached this point, it's important to know how the review process works. Every application submitted for publication must meet strict requirements: minimal permissions, source-based builds, support for multiple architectures, proper resource cleanup, validated metadata, versions pinned to specific commits, and much more. Over the years, these requirements have become increasingly strict as the number of users and submissions has grown. An application that might have been accepted a few years ago would likely be rejected today without hesitation. With the rise of so-called vibe coding, software development driven almost entirely by AI, submitting an application to Flathub has, for many people, become little more than checking a box handled by an automated agent. Reviewers started receiving pull requests that didn't follow the standard submission template, and when they tried to communicate with the authors, they were met with long, confusing, AI-generated replies, followed by force pushes that failed to address the feedback they had actually received. In response, around January 2026, Flathub reviewers introduced an internal label called AI Slop. It was used to signal to other reviewers that a particular pull request appeared to be entirely AI-generated, or that the author was communicating through a chatbot. The label didn't automatically block an application, but it warned reviewers not to spend extra time writing detailed explanations or offering additional patience. Developer Evangelos Petarakis, known for projects such as Tuba and Turntable, explained in a blog post that Flathub's real problem isn't ideological. Instead, the volunteer-run review infrastructure simply can no longer keep up with the flood of spam-like submissions. He noted that only a handful of reviewers are left dealing with people who expect their applications to be accepted without any meaningful conversation, sometimes refusing to communicate directly with reviewers and letting AI agents speak on their behalf instead. Another important point Petarakis highlights is the loss of the educational aspect of the review process. Normally, reviewing isn't just a checklist. It's also a way for new developers to learn best practices, user interface guidelines, and the design principles of the ecosystem. When the entire process is automated, that learning opportunity disappears completely. When the ban was first announced, many critics argued that Flathub was making a mistake by rejecting a new generation of applications simply because they were vibe-coded. They warned that the platform could end up driving developers and users toward alternative formats, such as Snap. Petarakis decided to test those claims himself. He examined 120 code repositories whose pull requests to be included on Flathub had been rejected and labelled as AI Slop. As he openly admitted, his methodology was neither rigorous nor academic. Instead, it was a manual review, repository by repository, to determine whether the projects were still being actively maintained. The results were striking. Out of the 120 projects he analysed, only 32 still showed signs of activity, while 88 had been completely abandoned, with many of them even having their source code deleted entirely. That translates to an abandonment rate of roughly 73% within just a few months of their original submission. Paterakis was also transparent about the limitations of his analysis. He acknowledged that it's difficult to determine with certainty whether a project is truly maintained based solely on the frequency of commits. Sometimes software is simply finished and no longer requires changes, while in other cases developers may take extended breaks. Even so, given that these projects had been submitted for publication only a few months earlier, he argued that it would have been reasonable to expect at least some minimal monthly updates if their authors were genuinely committed to maintaining them. Paterakis' conclusion is not that all AI-generated projects are doomed to fail. He himself makes it clear that this was not the purpose of his analysis. Rather, the main point is that the initial concern that the ban would drive away valuable contributors and projects with real potential does not appear to be supported by the data. If nearly 3/4 of the rejected applications disappeared within just a few months anyway, it suggests that, regardless of Flathub's policy, those projects likely would not have survived on the platform for very long. The OS News website picked up these findings and took the observation one step further. If AI tools truly delivered the promised benefits, giving programmers more time to focus on quality and innovation, we should already be seeing a wave of excellent, complex, genuinely useful applications. Instead, what we mostly see are predictable clones of tools that already exist. Audio players, note-taking apps, Pomodoro timers, small interfaces for various APIs, the kind of projects beginners were already creating before AI became popular, except now they appear in much larger numbers and disappear almost as quickly as they were created. The argument is straightforward. Generating code that simply runs has never been the difficult or valuable part of programming. The truly challenging part has always been building something that solves a real problem, something people actually want to use. That requires identifying an unmet need, thoughtful design decisions, and, most importantly, long-term personal commitment. Exactly what appears to be missing from the vast majority of quickly generated AI projects. It is important to mention that project abandonment is not a new phenomenon specific only to the AI era. Open source has always been, to some extent, a graveyard of hobby projects started with enthusiasm and left to die after a few months, regardless of whether a chatbot was involved in writing the code or not. Anyone who has followed the free software scene for years has seen this cycle repeat itself. Initial excitement, attention from the community, and then silence. What does appear to be changing, however, is the speed and scale of the phenomenon. The extremely low barrier to entry offered by AI tools, combined with the lack of genuine personal commitment to a project, significantly increases the abandonment rate. In practice, it is easier than ever to create something that looks like a functional application, but it is equally easy to give up on it as soon as the initial interest disappears. Even Paterakis, while critical of the way AI tools are being used, acknowledged an inconsistency in Flathub's policy. The platform continues to allow proprietary applications that almost certainly contain AI-written, AI-reviewed, or AI-tested code without subjecting them to the same restrictions. In practice, those who make their code open and transparent are penalised, while those who hide their development practices behind a closed-source product remain unaffected. This is a strong argument for why many expect the current policy to eventually be revised or refined. Flathub introduced a partial ban on applications submitted automatically with the help of AI, motivated not by an ideological stance, but by the practical need to protect a review infrastructure that relies entirely on volunteers and is already overwhelmed by the volume of submissions. A few months later, an independent analysis shows that nearly 3/4 of the projects rejected under the AI Slop label were either abandoned or completely deleted. This is not definitive scientific proof, but it is a strong indication that concerns about losing valuable contributions because of this policy have, at least so far, not been supported by the evidence. It remains to be seen whether other open source platforms and communities will adopt similar policies, and whether, as some critics of the ban suggest, the pressure created by AI tools will eventually force a revision of these rules. Thank you to all the channel members. Your support means a lot to me and helps keep the channel going. If you enjoyed this topic, leave a like, subscribe for more analysis from the world of Linux and open source, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Flathub's ban is the right solution, or is it just a temporary measure until AI technology becomes advanced enough that it can no longer be ignored? See you in the next video.